You're listening to The Wedding Whisperer with Sarah Burton of Simply Love Studio in Lexington, Kentucky. As we go into October, it is the busiest wedding season here in Kentucky, and I actually changed my whole game plan for the podcast for this month. I wanted to talk about something different. I feel like a lot of what we talk about and what you see online is always very pretty. Sometimes we forget about what's real and real life, and that there are people behind each of these small businesses or even the big businesses that you are working with on your wedding day. I want to talk about realistic expectations from your vendors. The thing about my role as a wedding concierge, I am in a very unique position. I literally tell people I have a made up job because honestly, I do. I get to hear feedback from couples, but I also get to hear the feedback from vendors. I'll see posts on Saturdays during the wedding, and sometimes the vendors call me on their way home and they're like, oh my gosh, let me tell you what happened. What should I have done differently? That kind of thing. I text one of my group chats with wedding planners and then text my group chat with some photographers. And I was like, hey, what are some unrealistic expectations that you are seeing your couples have from you? They are all really important things that I want to talk about and I want to address, because if we don't talk to you about those things, you don't know. This is probably going to be a 2-part episode. I'm figuring this out as I go. The first thing I wanted to talk about are the 2 weddings that when I did full service planning before Simply Love Studio, that maybe had unrealistic expectations of me. And for myself, when I get a review on Google or Wedding Wire or anywhere that is not 5 stars, it's a 0. In my mind, it's either 5 stars or 0. A 4-star is not acceptable for me. I work really hard and I live, eat, and breathe my job, whether I should or not. I do, because I want to be the best at what I do. I want to know that when I'm referring my couples to vendors, that they're the right fit because of the situations that I had as a vendor. I want to share, like I said, my 2 weddings that I did during my full service planning days, that maybe their expectations weren't unrealistic. You can be the one to decide that. I will tell you what I would have done different. I'm just going to dive right in. The first one was around 2010, and I had a 50th anniversary party booked that morning. It was actually, they were going to do a full mass at 10 a.m. And then they were going to a large reception area, and we were having essentially a lunch and cutting cake, and they were leaving. It was very short, sweet, simple. It was beautiful. And so I had that booked. And then I got an inquiry from a groom's mother about doing the coordinating for her son and his fiance. I went and met with her, and she told me the date, and I let her know that I actually already had an event booked for that morning. However, it was an early morning event, and their wedding was not going to be until later that afternoon. And so I would finish up my event that morning and then come straight there. However, I would also have my assistant that did every single wedding with me at her event already. She would be the first person there. And then I would also bring in another assistant that would be like a lead that day. Her name was Amber. She was amazing. She was more experienced, and she literally ran circles around me. I would rather have Amber plan my wedding and event and be there that day of than for me to do that. Couples can be very well taken care of. I worked with this couple throughout all of the planning, and typically my communication was with the groom. It was just how they worked. And the day of the day of the wedding and the event that morning, everything went great. I left that event. I drove to the second event, and I thought everything went well. It was really warm outside. When I say really warm, it was probably 95 and it felt like 105. It was so hot outside. And it was in a pavilion. It did not have air. It was not enclosed. It was just out in the middle of a field. It was a beautiful space, but there was no air conditioning. But when you get married in August in Kentucky, you have to think about temperature and how you're going to feel if you get hot on your wedding day. The guest came. They saw the couple get married. They ate, they cut the cake, the couple cut the cake, and literally the guests left because they were hot and miserable. And a lot of them were older. So completely fair. We did not have a DJ, so there was not any traditional open the dance floor dancing. It was an afternoon wedding. I don't even think there was alcohol. So it was a fairly quick reception. As a planner, sometimes you talk to your couple right after the wedding. Sometimes it's a week or two later. It just kind of depends. Every situation is different. So it wasn't uncommon that I did not talk to them for a couple days. And some weddings, as a planner, you have a bunch of stuff you have to give back to somebody, and sometimes you don't. That particular wedding, I did not have a bunch of stuff that I had to give back, so I didn't see anybody in person. About a week and a half later, I got an email from Wedding Wire telling me that I had a new review, and I was like, oh, cool. So I go to read it, and it was this groom, and he talked about how I was really great during all of the planning, but on the wedding day that I completely dropped the ball and that I was nowhere to be found. And I was kind of taken back by this because I'm like, this was discussed at the initial meeting. This was in your contract. And I actually made it there before the ceremony started that day. The only thing I missed was my teammates steaming the chair covers and setting the tables up. Like, they literally put the table linens on, they put the arrangements on the table, and they steamed the chair covers. That was all that I really missed that morning. I mean, I was there when the bride put her dress on because I remember being in the restroom area where she was at and seeing her before the wedding started. So I know that I was there for that part of it. And so he just talked about how I had dropped the ball and I was nowhere to be found. And I'm like, but I was there. And so I really struggled with that. And I reached out to his mom because she was the one that paid for my planning services. And she said that he was just, really disappointed that I wasn't there. And I'm like, but we discussed this in the beginning. We discussed this before you signed your contract. It is in your contract that I was not, at no point did it guarantee I was going to be there. I was planning to come after my first event, but I had other people there because I didn't know what my day was going to look like. And she was like, yeah, he was just disappointed. If you are, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, if you are old enough to get married, you do not need a wedding planner to be there by your side. I can't put your clothes on you. I can help you tie your bow tie, but I can't put your pants on you. I can't put your shoes on you. You need to be able to do that yourself if you're getting married. I was just kind of taken back by that, and I sat on it and thought about it. And the groom and I, we typically text during the day, and then we talked on the phone if it were evening. So I texted him. I was like, hey, when you get off work today, if you don't mind, just give me a call. I saw your review. I just kind of wanted to talk through that with you and kind of see where your head's at and, what I can do differently or what I can do to fix this, etc. And of course, he never called and he never responded to my text message at that point. So I kind of had to let it go. That was maybe year 2 or 3 into my planning career. And so at that point, I actually never booked 2 events on the same day again. That was kind of my lesson learned. Even though I feel like I held up my end of the deal, I had the event covered. I was there. I thought I had things taken care of and everything was perfect that day. And I think that he was just disappointed that people left earlier than he thought they would because it was so hot. And I think he wanted somebody to blame, and they found me to blame for that. My lesson that I learned on that as a vendor was, like I said, to not book 2 weddings in a day. If somebody was booking my company, then I was going to be the one that was there on the wedding day. The second wedding where I think the couple had unrealistic expectations was maybe year 4 or 5 of my planning career. And I learned a lot from this wedding. And this wedding is part of the reason that I do what I do now, because I was not a good fit for this couple. Another planner had referred me to this couple because they were not within their budget. And looking back now, I wish I would not have taken the wedding. But as you are newer in your role in your business, you kind of have to take take the money when it comes as a vendor, to be honest. So with this wedding, they booked a beautiful venue, and this was several years ago. They had a $14,000 budget, which would probably be equivalent to a $20,000 budget now. And they wanted a venue that was about $7,000. We typically say in the vendor world that if a bride and groom book a vendor that is half of their budget, that they're going to be venue poor. They're going to have a beautiful venue, but they're not going to be able to afford much else. And that was the situation here. And we looked at other venues, but they couldn't get this one out of their head. And so that was the one they went with. And so they spent $7,000 on the venue. They spent, I think, about $2,200 with me. They spent about $3,000 with their photographer. So we are at $12,000 of their $14,000 budget. At that point, I should have known to walk away from the wedding, because I should have known at that point that nothing was going to go well. Every couple that I meet with now, I tell them that they're probably going to spend 25% more than they actually intend to. If the max they want to spend is $14,000, I would plan to shoot for $10,000 to $11,000, because you're going to spend $14,000. No matter what your budget is, you're always going to spend more. By the time you add taxes to vendors, you do gratuity, you need random things. The week of, things just pop up, etc. With this couple, it was really hard during the planning process, and I knew that the day was going to be challenging. So I brought in my normal assistant that did all of my weddings with me, who was phenomenal. And I brought in an additional person that day that also had experience in the wedding industry, had worked weddings before. And so I had not budgeted for that third person, but I was like, you know what? I would rather have somebody else there for an extra 8 to 10 hours to know that things are taken care of, that this couple is not going to be able to complain and say that I didn't do my job. I felt like they had unrealistic expectations. And I feel like anytime a couple spends more on their wedding than they have to spend, or they thought they were going to spend, I feel like the expectations become higher and more unrealistic, which is what led to today's podcast and the next podcast. I brought in that third person, and we were doing setup. The bride wanted mismatched place settings, like china, the pretty china, at every single table and every single place setting. She wanted them to be preset, and then the guests carry them up to the buffet. Fine, we can do that. And that's one of those things when you first get engaged, going to the peddler's mall and going to yard sales, it sounds like a whole lot of fun. Well, when you start having to buy hundreds of every item, it takes time. Then you also have to clean all of those things. When you could just rent that from Purdon's or Goff, and it's probably going to be cheaper, and it's going to come cleaned, and you can send it back dirty. I start setting everything up that day, and I'm setting out all of the plates and the silverware. She also wanted to purchase all the silverware because she thought it was cheaper to do it that way than to rent it. Well, we were short. I think it's 16 plates. I still remember that number. And then we were also short forks and knives. For the meal that she was having, we needed all of those things, because your guests cannot go through the buffet and barbecue people just put the food in your hands and you go on about your business. You have to have plates for your guest. Even though I had two people there working that day, it's more ideal for someone else to leave the venue than me. We were 40 minutes away from Lexington, and I just did not feel comfortable. And this is just on me. I hate sending people out to do errands, because you never know what's going to happen. And that's just all in my head. That's the planner in me. So I went to Dollar Tree. That was the closest place I could go. We didn't have a Dollar General store on every corner at that point. So I went to Dollar Tree. It was a good 35 minutes from where I was at. And I bought plates and I bought forks and knives. Did those get washed before the guest ate out of them? I'll let you take a guess on that one. And so that was probably an hour, 15, 20 minutes out of the day of me going to get those. That was expenses that I had to pay for that day personally. I come back and one of my team members has set up the photo booth, and it's beautiful. She has all these pictures, and the bride was very specific about how she wanted her photo booth set up. And then we're like, okay, let's do a trial run with the camera. And this was several years ago. This was before iPads were used for photo booths. Again, this couple was on a budget, so we did not have a professional photo booth there. And we couldn't get the camera to work. We tried, all three of us tried. And I was like, okay, we're going to have to ask the bride. And she was like, so I asked her, and she was like, you know what? We actually used it a couple months ago. We tried to use it, and it wasn't working. So you're saying you brought a camera that wasn't working the last time you tried to use it. We bought all of this film to go with it, but it doesn't work. Cool. And so that, of course, was my fault that her camera wasn't working, and I should be able to figure it out. I can't figure out how to make a camera work. And like I said, we're too far away at that point for me to just go get a camera. And the photographers were already there that day. So it's not like I could be like, hey, can you bring an extra, camera with you of some sort? Because many photographers have different options for cameras for photo booths. And so they were already there. So I couldn't ask them to do that. So we had to essentially forego the photo booth. She also wanted it set up in a space where there was not going to be lighting. It was going to get dark at probably 9:00, and there was not going to be any overhead lighting there, but that's where she wanted the photo booth set up. So we had a photo booth set up that looked beautiful with no camera there. The one rule that I had for myself on wedding days was that ceremonies don't start late. I don't know where I came up with that rule from. That was my one thing. Like, when your ceremony starts on time, like that's why we're all there. This particular wedding, I had everyone lining up, and I was like, where is XYZ person? And the maid of honor was like, well, we had some issues, and she left. She left the property? She left the property. Okay. Is she coming back? We don't know. Okay, well, we have 150 guests that are sitting down there waiting for the ceremony to start. It is really hot outside. This was also an August wedding. Maybe this is a theme for August. We have to start. It's a little bit of a walk down to the ceremony. I'm like, we really got to start walking. So the person that left came back, and I don't think they made up or anything that, I don't know what happened that this person left, but they came back. So we had the ceremony, and we started the reception, and the caterer comes up and was like, so just wanted to let you know that when we processed the credit card was declined. Like, okay, cool. This is probably why you should not process payment the day of the wedding as a vendor. I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do about that? I can't pay their bill for them. I didn't sign that contract. The planner is not the one that pays the bills for the couple. We're a hired vendor as well. So I had to go up to the groom. The caterer was like, we can't leave until we have other forms of payment. Totally get it. You have to be paid. That was a lot of money. I have to go up to the groom during the middle of the reception to be like, so we have a little bit of a problem. He wrote a check, and he had to go get his checkbook out of the truck in the middle, in the middle of the reception. That was awful. So I learned a lot that day about couples and paying vendors. I guess the check cleared. I never heard anything else after that. But the couple, the bride in particular, was not happy with how the caterers were dressed that day. She had given me specific instructions to give them, and I relayed those instructions. She did not want them in jeans, which I completely understand. However, that was part of that's their traditional, or that's their uniform for weddings. I had requested something different. However, they didn't care. That didn't get passed on, whatever. The couple also wanted, the bride bought the clear containers for the drinks because it's much prettier than when a caterer comes in with a big bulk drink canister. However, when you buy the really pretty glass ones, I don't know if you've used those anytime lately, most of them pour drinks very slowly. So we were holding up the whole dinner line because the guests were trying to get their drinks. And she was very particular. These clear glass containers were very important to her. I go over and try to start helping people get it. It's just not working. It's just not working. It's coming out like we're going to be there. We would still be there if we were still using those containers. I just picked up the big containers from the caterer and just started serving the drinks from that so that we got everybody through the buffet line. Like I said, the ceremony starting on time is one of my rules that I have for myself. And the other thing is not only your couple experience, the bride and groom experience, but your guest experience. We don't want your guests standing in line. They have already set outside for an outdoor ceremony in August, and we want them to be able to come in, get their food, and have a drink. We don't want them standing in line just waiting for a drink. My assistant Hensley and I, we started getting their water and sweet tea and lemonade from the big canisters. I remember the bride looking at me and seeing those and making eye contact with me. And it's like she could have killed me because we were using those canisters. And I'm like, yeah, it just kind of, as a planner, you have to make those decisions. And while you may be listening to this and you're like, that is so irrelevant and that is so not important, it was important to her. And I understand that it was important to her. But we also have to make sure that your guests get through the buffet line and your reception continues and your guests have something to drink, especially when it's August. One of the things I did not mention is that day when we arrived, there were approximately 4,000 totes of Hobby Lobby stuff. And it basically looked like Hobby Lobby had shown up at this venue. And this venue was already beautiful to start with. It did not need a lot of extra stuff. There was a particular cross that she had in there that she wanted hung behind their sweetheart table. Of all of the things that we did that day, that was honestly the only regret I have to this day was not getting that cross hung up. From the time, I spent that extra probably hour and 15 minutes going to the Dollar Tree to get, plates and silverware. We spent probably an hour working on the camera, trying to get the camera to work. There were just a lot of other things that day that I thought going into it that I would have time for, and bringing in an additional staff member to also take care of things, that things wouldn't get left behind. Everything would get done, but it just didn't. And that's another reason why in podcasts before I've talked about don't buy stuff, because the more stuff you have, the more you have to take to the venue, the more you have to get to your planner ahead of time, the more instructions you have to give. And honestly, most of it at the end of the day does not add to your experience. It does not add to your guest experience. Would a cross have added to the overall experience? That's for you to decide, but it was important to her. Fast forward, it is now time for all of these plates to be cleaned and picked up. If you do not have a caterer that is a full service caterer, they typically do not bus the tables. And she did not have money in her budget to pay that particular caterer to bus the tables. My assistant and I were the ones that bus the tables. I will tell you that most planners will not do that for you. It is not their responsibility to do that for you. It is not their role. I hate to be the person to be like, that's not the job of the wedding planner, or that's not the job of whatever, but it's not. That is your caterer's role. In that situation where the caterer was not a full service caterer, the couple should have used disposable dinnerware, like disposable plates. Like, we should have been able to throw those plates right in the trash can. However, because we had all of those mismatched china plates. She planned to keep those or to resell those after the wedding so that she could recoup her money. What I can tell you is that I would do a lot of things as a planner that I didn't necessarily think was my role or that I didn't want to do. But I would say where I draw the line was cleaning barbecue sauce off of someone's plate. And I don't know why. That's where my line is at. I worked in restaurants in college, and anytime we were backed up, especially on Sundays, like if I had to go over and scrape the plates and put them all in the industrial dishwasher where you like slam it down and all of those things, like I was fine with that. I'm not too good to do the dishes, but that was kind of where you have a whole reception that has to take place. You have your dances that have to take place. You have your gifts that have to be taken to someone's car. You have just so many things that have to happen during that reception before the open dance floor happens. And then I was also clearing the tables in the middle of trying to make all that happen. I had to draw the line somewhere. I literally ran water in the industrial sink at the venue and put the plates in there. Would I do that again? I don't know. I actually will come back to that because I do know. There were a lot of, like I said, unrealistic expectations from the couple that day. I was also still newer in my career at that point that, yes, I can run a wedding day, but there were so many things that happened that day that I couldn't have been prepared for. I thought I was, but you can only do so much. And the other thing, like I talked about, I had the Dollar Tree bill for the extra plates and stuff. I also ended up having to pay for a part of rehearsal dinner the night before. We won't even get into why on that. The day of, because the caterer was not a full service caterer, they were not the ones bringing the ice. But somehow I was the one that ended up being responsible for the ice, which I would never do at this point or never recommend any planner to take care of. That is a caterer's role. A bartender's role is not a planner's role. So I was also had a substantial amount of ice that I paid for that day. And while my expenses weren't exorbitant, they still added up for a wedding that wasn't mine. In addition to the extra, labor hours that I had paid for someone to be there. And bless her heart, she worked all day too. I think that all of these things were a combination of the couple wanted a $25,000 to $30,000 wedding and they had a $14,000 budget. Where I know that I personally went wrong as a vendor, as a planner, was even taking that wedding. She was going to hire somebody as a planner. I don't think would have been happy with anyone. And it just is what it is, because of her personality. And she just didn't have the money to have the wedding she wanted. And that was going to fall on everyone else. And I hate that for her. I hate that for me. After the wedding was over, they sent an email a couple days later and was like, hey, let's schedule a time to sit down and chat and talk about everything. I was like, absolutely, let's do that, because I learned a lot from this wedding. I'm sure you have a lot you want to tell me. But when I looked at her wedding pictures, they were amazing. And she was smiling and so happy in every one of those. And I never actually saw her smile that much at the wedding. So that's why you also have a really good photographer, because they're there to capture that and to make that happen and to make magic happen. Anyway, so she sent an email asking to schedule a time. So I gave them several times that week that I could meet. And they were basically like, well, we're going to need longer than those time frames to meet with you. And I'm like, you don't think an hour is long enough for us to have a discussion about your wedding day? Like, there's nothing we can change now. She was like, no, we think it's going to take longer than that. And I'm like, honestly, if it's going to take longer than that, I don't even really want to have this conversation, because I know the things where I went wrong, and I know the things that I would have done different. I know that your expectations were fairly unreasonable for your budget, and it is what it is. This was 13 years ago, and I still think about this wedding a lot. I learned a lot. This wedding, I wouldn't say it broke me, but it made me rethink a lot. It made me realize the importance of vendor and couples being a good fit for each other. This particular couple really needed to have someone that was older, because I was still a baby at that point and they were older than me. And I think that going into it, she did not have the trust for me or the respect for me to do my job. And I think she doubted me the entire time. And I was going to fail in her eyes no matter what. I think she should have booked a venue that was probably $3,000 or less. A $7,000 venue for a $14,000 budget was mistake one. And we could never recover from that, no matter what I would have done. That day could have been 100% perfect, in my opinion, and she would still have complaints about it. Fast forward about a year and a half, maybe even 2 years now, I get a letter in the mail from her one day, and it is a list of all of the things that I had done wrong the day of the wedding, and a check for the things that she owed me for. And the only thing on that list that I agreed with was that the cross did not get put up behind the sweetheart table. And to this day, I don't really know like how that did not happen. I just know that it didn't happen. And I also know that this was at a venue where you cannot really put nails and stuff in the wall. You can't do that at any venue. So I don't know if we would have had to have used command strips, and we didn't have those. I don't remember those logistics, but that she had a front and back list on a sheet of paper of all the things that I had done wrong. And truly looking at that, that was the only one that I felt remorseful for. So I learned a lot from that. I think that every vendor, regardless of whether they're a planner, a DJ, a caterer, whatever, has at some point experienced that where a couple or a client has expected more from them than they should have, or they've had unrealistic expectations of what that role does. We had Antonia from City Barbecue on the podcast, maybe 6-8 weeks ago. And we talked about the different types of service that they provide. They were not the caterer for this particular wedding I'm talking about. They were not open in Lexington at that point. Just want to reiterate that. But, she talked about they had their different levels of service, where some of it comes with drop off, some of it comes with setup, and some in serving, and some of it comes with the whole thing where they clean the tables and all. So I think you have to really be careful, be realistic, and stay within your budget. If that means inviting less people so that you can stay within your budget, invite less people. If that means that you need to push the wedding 6 months or 8 months so that you can save more money, push the wedding. You're still going to get married. It's still going to be beautiful. And know that the things like your drinks being in a clear canister versus a large canister from a caterer doesn't matter. Yes, it's more aesthetically pleasing, but at the end of the day, your guests are going to have something to drink, and it's going to be good, and you're going to get married. And we're there to make sure that you get married that day. If you are DIYing anything, make sure you see that from start to finish. If you decide that you're going to provide all of your own cups and plates, you need to make sure that you have those for every single guest and more, because most likely some are going to get broken in transport. If you are going to DIY centerpieces, you need to make sure you have them for all of your tables. If you're going to have a DIY photo booth, we need to make sure that your camera works for that. And we want to do all of that stuff months before the wedding. We don't want to be doing that 2 weeks before the wedding and you go into flea markets on Saturday mornings. All of those things need to be done well in advance. I don't know that I've ever actually shared these stories with anybody before because, like I said, for me, it's either a 5-star or a 0. And I work really hard to get those 5 stars, and I want people to be happy. I never want anyone to look back at their wedding day and to remember the random things or that something didn't go perfect. But your vendors cannot control the weather. We cannot control how hot it is, how cold it is, if it rains, if it snows, whatever it may be. Your vendors are human. They're probably going to make mistakes. I mean, I don't know that any of us have ever done a wedding where we didn't make a mistake. Just a lot of times nobody realizes it, or we're, good enough to cover it up. I feel like I'm depressed now. I'm sorry about that. 2 weeks from now, we are going to talk about specific realistic expectations from your vendors. Like I said, I text some planners, I text some photographers, and they gave me a lot of really good things to talk about. I'm excited to share those with you. Because if we don't tell you those things, you don't know. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you for coming to my therapy session with myself. I think most vendors, no, not most, all wedding vendors, we all strive to be the best at what we are. And anytime before you leave less than a 5-star review for someone on Google, Wedding Wire, The Knot, reach out to them. Let them know, tell them why, and hear their feedback, hear their reasoning why, and give them a chance before you put negative things about them out there for the world to see. Because I can almost guarantee there's more behind any type of situation on a wedding day than you ever realized. For more information about Simply Love Studio or to schedule your wedding consultation, go to simplylovestudio.com.